What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to Is Life Better in the USA or in Europe? And yeah, I saw this pop up and I thought I'd do these kinds of reactions and I'm going to find it fascinating. And that's pretty much it. I hope it's not going to offend people because I know people get touchy about this sort of stuff. But I'm just here to see, I guess, someone who's actually lived both sides. Obviously, it's hard to compare because, for example, Europe is so diverse. Some parts of Europe are so much better, so much more... Like, he'll be speaking about certain parts of Europe as opposed to maybe other parts. I assume he's probably lived in like places like Germany or I don't know. I'm just thinking Germany, maybe France, Spain. I would say the UK, but I don't want to big the UK up that much, especially with all the problems. But certain parts in Europe are definitely a lot nicer and a lot better. Like, I've been to, and also there's parts in like I don't know to be fair. But same with the US. I don't think it's to the same extremes because it is completely different countries in Europe, not in the UK. And even though the US, like, different states are very different, it will sort of slowly trickle down to be like different. Like, you go up, you go down, or whatever way you go, it will slowly change through the states you go. And it is still the same country, although it is different cultures in certain degrees and different things like that. But we're gonna see. I guess he's, again, someone who's lived in both countries. I've never watched this channel before, so I'm not 100% sure, but we're going to check this out. Hopefully you're going to enjoy. Links are in the description to my Patreon if you want to see some more of my videos. But yeah, let's jump into this and see his honest review.
It turns out humans are not the same everywhere. Who you are is at least partially influenced by where you are. Your environment literally has an impact on you. And if you don't believe me, studies show this. And this is a dynamic that's influencing all of us, including me, as I've moved from one continent to another. The tug of war between the US and Europe is just so intriguing to me. It just feels like this endless battle.
How could I forget saying Italy? Italy is probably one of the best places you can live. Austria's beautiful. Switzerland is expensive because it's, I guess, so nice, the Scandinavian countries. Yeah, there's a lot of places you could mention, to be fair, before the UK. I don't know why. Or Ireland, to be fair, Ireland is like, seems like it's the best country to live at the moment in certain aspects. But
battle between the new and the old world in the West. There's no right and wrong, obviously, when it comes to a discussion like this of cultural comparison. There's just trade-offs. It turns out that you can't have it all. I think the human race really benefits as a species from our differences. Plus, it's really fun to articulate the things that I'm seeing take place in the world. And so that's the inspiration behind this piece, comparing the life that I've lived for 19 years in the US to the one that I've lived for 5 years here in Europe, and how my view of things continues to evolve. Now, national stereotypes are nothing new, right? One of the easiest ones to point to is the idea that there's more introversion in Asia, for example. Generally speaking, massive generalization, and more extroversion in other places, like Brazil. There are exceptions to all generalizations, right? But there's also a grain of truth. You know, the jokes that we make about these sorts of things wouldn't be funny if they were completely inaccurate. If I were to say, oh, the US is a quiet country that is very respectful to all other nations and doesn't make a lot of noise.
oh, Logan Paul, man, this video was... He just went around Japan being loud as fuck, man. Oh my days.
I lose all credibility, right? You just don't believe me because there's not really a lot of truth to that. Now, while I've already made a few pieces exploring cultural comparisons between different parts of the world, different countries and different regions, I want to dig a little bit deeper this time. Beyond superficial comparisons like, oh,
Europeans use air conditioning a lot less than Americans.
Yes, produce is a lot cheaper and a lot higher quality in Europe than in the United States because the governments subsidize.
Is it cheaper? Damn, I didn't know that. Maybe Europe, maybe inland Europe more so than the UK. But I guess maybe, I don't know.
That sort of thing, because people care about it a lot more. And yes, technology is a lot more affordable in the United States, partially because of taxation on imports, but also because as a society, there's more of an orientation towards innovation. And one of the ways that keeping up with the Joneses manifests itself in the US is having the latest shiny thing. But I want to dig deeper into the character of these two continents and the trends that I'm noticing in people that live in these two continents.
Oh my God, there's no lanes. There are no lanes.
Fair warning.
Yeah, see, that's what I mean. Some parts of Europe aren't the same. It's a lot more, I don't know. It's just different cultures, you know. Like, Eastern Europe, there's some really nice places and some places that I don't want to say aren't nice, but it's just a lot more, it's just different. It's different to maybe what you'd expect. But yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons, but I think Eastern Europe definitely had a lot more problems in the past, which has led to certain problems now that I guess they're trying to have to go through. And yeah, that's what I mean when it's hard to compare, because some parts of Europe will be seen as maybe better to live, some parts will be seen as worse, but it's a generalization. The UK would probably be worse in a lot of aspects than other parts of Europe, for example. But yeah, I guess we're gonna see. I guess I hope he's gonna talk about specific countries as well, specific states, because it'll make it a much more interesting video.
These are just my opinions. I am just sharing my observations that I see in the world and within myself. So take it or leave it. And if you disagree with something that I say, please feel free to share it in the comments. This is supposed to be fun. I find this sort of thing fun.
Ethos.
For every point I'm going to make here, I'm going to really try, despite my biases, yes, I chose to live in Europe, explore the positives and negatives here, because I think there are positives and negatives on both sides. Americans are known for their patriotism, literally thinking to themselves, we are the best. And that's definitely not everyone, but enough people do think that it's a real thing. This really cracks me up because, you know, that's got to be one of the fastest ways that I can think of to tick someone off. Like, who likes the guy who shows up at the party and won't stop talking about how they're the best? As I'm sure you can tell, this really annoyed me quite a bit, having grown up in the US but with immigrant parents. But a lot of Americans really believe this. And what doesn't help matters is the reality that a lot of people can point to the fact that the US is a world superpower. And look, there are a lot of really proud Europeans too, and maybe secretly they think they're the best, okay? But it is a little bit harder to make the argument that you're the top dog right now if you're Greek or Italian, when in reality your moment to shine came centuries ago.
Yeah, I guess that's true, to be fair. If they were the global superpower, they probably would be a lot louder. And don't get me wrong, places like Greece and Italy are so nice to go to. I mean, I'm speaking as someone who would go there for like vacation, but I feel like Italy was still probably top 5 places to live in the world. Just living somewhere in northern Italy and you're living good, man. But you eat healthy, the weather's good. It's just beautiful, to be honest. Yeah, it's all pros, but there's obviously cons that I don't really know about, I guess, because I'm not someone who lives there. But yeah, I guess if it was the top dog, the people there would be a lot louder, but that's just how it is, right? They're not louder because they're not the superpower or one of. I guess they are up there as a maybe not a superpower, but they're a powerful country to a degree, but not to the same level, I guess.
For the record, I don't think there's a best country. I don't think in those terms. I think different countries are good at different things. And I don't feel like quantitative measurements like GDP say anything about the quality of a country. Now, the reason I bring all this up is because of a weird feeling that I get when I return to the US. It's this feeling that I'm in the center of the universe. And obviously I know that's not the case. But the relationship between the US and Europe doesn't work the same way both ways. Here in Europe, there's a steady stream of news coming from the US. But when I'm over there, it feels like there isn't much talk about what's going on in the rest of the world unless something really big happens, like a war. Most mainstream media barely covers what's going on internationally. And unless you're a worldly American, and there definitely are some of those out there, you don't have very much of an idea of what's going on out there. In many ways, the US does feel geographically isolated. And maybe that's because the distance between Los Angeles and Las Vegas is bigger than the distance between Paris and London. It does feel like Europe is closer to a lot of the rest of the world. And because the distance is smaller, you can't pretend that there aren't neighbors all around you. France cannot pretend Germany isn't like right there. I personally believe this is a major factor in how we ended up with the stereotype that Americans are terrible at geography, world geography. Maybe also the stereotype that a lot of Americans are uncultured. And speaking of that, actually, culture is a confusing word.
Culture.
There's something extremely interesting to me about the whole conversation about culture. According to a lot of Europeans, the US is a place that lacks culture. But that doesn't make a lot of sense because the US is actually one of, if not the biggest exporters
of culture. I guess you see in music and stuff, right? How it is now, it's pretty much, and it's not predominantly US music, but a lot of it is US music, all genres as well. But then you got to think about like, even just like, you'll go to another country and you'll see, ow, fuck, I just banged my hand. You'll see, I don't know, food places. Would that be connected to the culture? I don't know, but just whatever it is, you'll see American stores in a country that isn't obviously in the US. So it's spread different things. Again, that may not be considered culture, but all these different things, right?
Of culture in the whole world. That's one of those things that really shocked me when I moved abroad. Everyone is exposed to the aforementioned American media, and therefore American politics and current events. American music is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. Honestly, you could say I'm an export of the United States, and I'm not sure I could argue with that. The US is like always the loudest kid in the room. And even just cities like New York are an explosion of art, and it's one city in a giant country. So what are we saying here really? What are Europeans referring to? I don't think these big mainstream exports are what Europeans are referring to. I think they're talking about what you do on a day-to-day basis and how much that can change from region to region. I'm talking about the customs and traditions that have been passed down for generations, the different regional dishes that come from centuries ago. I'm talking about the superstitions or the different card games or the celebrations that take place that commemorate something that happened before modern day France or Austria or Italy even existed. Bizarre linguistic quirks, beyond the fact that there's a different language every direction you look. Architecture that changes every few hundred kilometers or miles. Am I suggesting that the US does not have customs and traditions? No, it does. I think about Thanksgiving and Halloween and hot dogs and baseball, the Super Bowl. There are a lot of things. It's a big country. But one thing all of these things have in common is that they stretch across the entire expanse of the country. The US, for better or for worse, is associated with uniformity and scale. Maybe that's just a facet of being such a young country. For better or for worse, Europeans see the KFCs and the Starbucks that are dotted across all of their major cities, and they see that as the mark of the US and how it operates. Now, a lot of Americans know this, and some even criticize this, right? But it's still happening. I just personally have a sinking feeling when I see the same exact strip mall in any state that I might go. And it does feel like the only way I can see the same thing in Hungary and Spain is if I go to a major chain, a lot of which are...
You only really see the same places if you go to like a mall, because the malls are where like all the sort of similar shops are that you'll get across, I guess, Europe in general, right? But oh god, my window's open, so if you can hear that, I apologize. It's hot, but like, yeah, it's probably the same in the US because there's certain restaurants and stuff. I mean, it's not to the same degree, but there's certain restaurants that are only in certain regions and certain places that you'll only get in certain areas of the US. But I guess Europe, from country to country, is completely different, right? Like, you can get shops like in the UK. If I see a shop that I see in the UK in Europe, I'll be surprised. Like, I don't know what shop, like a Primark. Is that even a thing that people know about in the US? I think it's a British shop. It's just a massive shop here. Not everyone, it's cheap. You can get, I guess, decent quality clothes. And if I see a Primark not in England or not in the UK, I'm really surprised. But it's a shop that you'll find in every town in the UK, or multiple shops in every town or every city or whatever. But yeah, in the US, you'll definitely find more shops that are similar in the US. But again, it is the same country in the grand scheme of things. So
are American. Again, maybe this is because of size, you know? A 4-hour train ride can take you to any one of like 7 countries in Europe, and you're lucky if a 4-hour flight will take you outside of the US. And I think a lot of Europeans take pride in this cultural richness, the density of different things going on, you know, being able to go to a different place so easily. And
this pisses me off. I feel like the UK's kind of alienated itself. I feel like it's always been, not alienated, but inland Europe is definitely a lot more similar, I guess, culturally. And I feel like inland Europe also, the most disliked European country in Europe would be the UK. I'm almost certain. Or England, mainly. It would be England for sure. And I can't really blame them for that. But yeah, it's definitely, because obviously it's not connected, I feel like it's definitely more similar to Europe in a lot of areas. But it's probably a mixture of the two, of the US and Europe, to be honest. But like when he says Europe, he probably is mainly speaking about inland Europe. Obviously, when it comes to history and culture, obviously the UK as well. But again, I say the UK. I feel like Scotland and Wales probably aren't hated. It's just England, and again, probably for fair reasons. But
and not understand a word. One major difference for me between the Europe and US is the language element. And I know I care about this more than most people, but I do think it has an impact on your experience of each place. And it's one of the main reasons why I moved to Europe. Yes, you have all kinds of language diversity in places like Miami and New York, which is really cool. But overall, English will do the job in the US. That's really not the case in Europe. Yes, English is the most international language, but still to this day, not being able to speak French when you're in France means you are not having the full French experience.
But it makes it harder. You got to learn them, right? Which obviously, if someone's good languages, you're sorted. But I went to Austria. We went sort of somewhere not in the center to explore, and it was hard to get where we wanted to get to. Again, it's on us for not speaking German. But obviously in Romania, I'm alright because my girlfriend speaks Romanian. But I went to Spain. I mean, that was when I was younger. But yeah, when you travel, it's like, yeah, you are obviously in a different country, but it's so close. It's not that far in distance. It's such a shock.
That's just how it is. And honestly, I love living in a world where there are many different languages and many different ways to say things, and that we don't all necessarily understand each other. For me, it's very stimulating seeing or hearing the different sounds and different ways that people can communicate with each other. It adds a lot of color to the world. Yes, I speak Spanish, but if I go to Barcelona or spend time in Catalonia, I don't understand Catalan. I speak Italian, but Southern Italians are difficult for me to understand, partially because of the accent, partially because of the dialects. It's just awesome richness that I appreciate so much. And kind of counterintuitively, it is precisely because there is that barrier there, that it's difficult to learn a language, that it's difficult to decode how people are communicating, that when you do unlock that door, it's like that much more incredible. That is what makes languages so amazing to me. They're world expanding tools. I fell in love with France and with Europe when I did my exchange in France because I was forced to learn the language. I just had to. It's like learning how to think in a new way. There's something so exciting about that to me. Without that, I would have never immersed myself in France. I would have never created the life that I have now. Speaking the language is often the difference between having a superficial tourist experience and delving deeper into the culture. I like to think of it as overcoming the moat around a castle so that you can actually storm the castle itself. Who doesn't want to see what's inside that castle, you know what I mean? Now, Lingoda is the sponsor of this video, and they
got a sponsor getting his money. Let's go, man. Lingoda. If I could use that to learn languages too. I mean, I want to learn Romanian, but
the registration for your sprint. Thank you, Lingoda, for sponsoring this video. Speed of life. One of the things that really struck me the last time I went back to the US is the speed of things. And the fact that there are less guardrails, less people and things that are going to slow you down or get in your way. And because of that, many people go very fast. In the US, for example, it's perfectly socially acceptable to wolf down a sandwich in 3 minutes.
No, that's me. That's literally me. I eat quick. And there's nothing that's going to change that. I've tried eating slow. It's just not the same fun for me. I like eating quick. I don't know why, because you can't enjoy it as much, but I just love eating food quick.
And get right back to work. I'm not saying that's what always happens. I'm just saying that it's okay. People are not going to judge you. It's like an acceptable thing to do. And people will walk down the street eating, or they'll eat in their car. And in Europe, you're never going to see those sorts of things. Or if you do, it's like a extremely rare. I don't know. I can't remember ever seeing it personally. These things are not okay. They're looked down upon in exactly the same way that smoking is looked down upon in the US, which goes to show you human beings are willing to draw different lines in the sand.
I didn't know that. Is smoking in the US not as acceptable? I like that. I hate smoking personally, so I'm not against that at all. I guess in Europe, like, you'll be at a cafe, smoking is like a thing you'll see. It's just sort of part of, I don't know, you'll go to a cafe, sit with your friends, talk, have a smoke of a cigarette or something, and then have a coffee or tea or whatever. But yeah, I'm definitely for the US's point of view on that. I didn't know it was like that though, but damn, I'm not against it at all.
Europeans will tell you it's not healthy, right, to eat that fast. It's rushed. But it goes beyond that. It feels almost morally wrong. I think that's a good spot to pause and introduce a new concept. I have this running theory that there are two forces at play in shaping culture. The first is peer pressure. There's always a certain kind of pressure that exists, enforced by the people around you on how things should be, how you should operate. And the other idea is normalization. It's seeing a certain kind of behavior that's very widespread around you to the point where you get desensitized to it and you find it normal. So let's talk about some examples of this. I want to talk about work here for a second, which feels very related to the speed of things in my mind. The US is a super competitive society. There's a lot of peer pressure to work harder and longer, and if you don't, somebody will be there to replace you. No guardrails, no off switch, so it leads to a more imbalanced way of living, I find. This leads to a dynamic where there's very little vacation time, and not just that, people don't take that vacation time. You're lucky to get even a couple of weeks, but it's
That's so sad, man. That does make me sad. Imagine that. That's just horrible to even think about. That's how some people have to live their lives, but they're forced to. I mean, there are definitely people who are like that in the UK as well. I mean, some people have to work. If you've got a minimum wage job, you're going to have to work a lot more than the average person, but
been normalized to not even necessarily take that time. That becomes a sort of like self-perpetuating cycle. It does feel like there's a fear of stopping. So there's the peer pressure and the normalization of work that's taking place in the US. And the same is at work in Europe, but just in a very different way. In Europe, I feel a sort of peer pressure to not work at certain times, like on Sunday, because it's seen as insane and unhealthy. And because Europeans treasure their vacation time and really stick to it, it has a normalizing effect. I don't look at time off in the same way I used to. I'm coming to realize it's good to unplug, to recharge, to not have everything revolve around work. So there's pros and cons to both sides here, because I think the US is a really incredible place for the ambitious if you want to advance your career. And that feeling of ambition all around you can be infectious. I felt it as like a fresh wave of energy. The only thing is, it doesn't feel conducive to a healthy rhythm over the long term. And I think about grocery shopping, I was seeing a lot of people order on Instacart or Uber Eats or whatever, and it's not like those things don't exist in Europe.
oh, they do. I mean, again, here they do. I order quite a lot.
But there's like an emphasis on efficiency in the US. Here in Europe, a lot of people will shop for groceries on a very regular basis, almost daily.
Same. I go to the shop pretty much every day, because I just have a little smaller shop near me, and I'll just get foods. Obviously, there's days that I don't have time. I will order, or I'll go out and get something quick. But I do go to the shops to get food to make every day, because I like to cook as healthy. Obviously, that's just not well known. It's cheaper, and yeah, it's nicer to eat sort of fresher foods, just foods that you've made and you haven't spent stupid money on and makes you feel shit, but there's definitely an in-between, because you can also order just healthier options too, but there's positives to both. Obviously, if you could make food and you had the time for it, I can understand, but he says, and I've heard it before, Americans work a lot more in general. And I mean, if you're working more, you have less time to actually make foods. And if you've got a 10-hour day, 5 days a week, why are you going to waste an hour and a half, 2 hours a day making foods when you've only got then another 4 hours to do whatever you want? That's not really fair for anyone, mate. And I assume maybe some people also work more than that, to be fair. Maybe 6-day weeks, or maybe even 7-day weeks sometimes, which sounds terrible, but my girlfriend has had times where she's worked a lot. I wouldn't say 7-day weeks, but she's had weeks where she's worked 60 plus hours, which is crazy to think about. But then she's also had weeks where we went away, she didn't work for over a month at all, which also, I guess, is a nice thing for her, because she just didn't have to work or worry about it. I'd actually say for nearly 5 weeks she didn't work for. But yeah, it's an in-between, right? And that's also, she didn't get any pay for that, because her job isn't to that level. You don't get paid for holidays and stuff with her job,
or every other day for fresh produce, and they'll buy in season. There's nothing really efficient about that, but it is healthier and tastier. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit more about acceptable behavior, because it's related to this point I made about peer pressure and normalization. There are clearly different ideas about work, but also just what is acceptable behavior in general. I find that there's a lot more of an anything goes kind of attitude in the US than in Europe. Growing up, each year there would be a pajama day, which was this really fun day where you'd go to school in your pajamas. I did this when I was like 11, 12 years old. And I'm not sure what happened. Maybe this has always been the case and I didn't realize it, but it really struck me that I will see adults, full-grown adults, walking around in pajamas. In the US, I saw it when I was there just a few weeks ago. I have never seen that in Europe. And in fact, it's funny, the opposite's taking place here in Paris, where women in my life in particular will come and visit, and they feel they cannot go out without dressing well, because Paris is such a capital of fashion and looking good, I guess. I do draw a link, I don't know how related they are, but in my mind they're connected, between this casualness and the American dream. You're allowed to dream about things that feel ridiculous or impossible. Or maybe that contributes to the startup culture that exists in the US, the entrepreneurial spirit, and of course, I should say there's nuance there. There are differences between the coasts of the United States and the middle of the country. There are differences across the different countries in Europe on this particular issue and all issues. But still, I feel a different vibe when I'm here in Europe. And I have found that this has had a positive effect in my life. This is one thing I'm really grateful for from my time in the US. It's this mindset of like going for it, taking risks, and figuring out a lot of the rest later on. Look, I'm aware that there's a lot of psychoanalyzing going on here. And maybe the way that I see the world says a lot more about me than the world. I'm open to that possibility. But what I love about making these cultural comparisons is the fact that it's always a reminder that there's more than one way to live life. I think a lot of life is shaped by our values and the things that we choose to stand by. And a lot of it is based off of what resonates, what feels right. If you have the privilege to travel or to move to another place, it can be a world-expanding experience. But even if you can't do that, being aware of the biases inherent in living in a particular place, because there are always biases, can lead to a richer, more well-rounded experience of life, I think. Life is full of trade-offs, but I do believe in the power of picking and choosing what works for you. You deciding what your trade-offs are to the extent that you can. I really try my hardest to embody the best of all the places that I've ever lived in. It's just fun, I guess, to see how different groups of humans operate. And I think we can better appreciate the world with contrast. Anyway, I hope this gave you some food for thought, and thanks for watching.
Well, there we go. I mean, it's fascinating, right? Because I probably see Europe in the same sort of way, because I mean, I was considering moving to Romania for maybe a year or two. My girlfriend, she was thinking about maybe doing studies, and it's just so much cheaper, and you can get a nice place there for 2/5 of the price, I'd say. And I mean, yeah, it's warmer there. There's definitely positives to living there, but at the same time, there's something about living in the country that you're from, right? Or for me personally, some people love to explore, and I love to explore, but are open to living somewhere else where it's a different language, different culture. I'm definitely up for that, but it's getting out your comfort zone, and that's quite hard for me, to be fair. I mean, the UK, even though it's Europe, it would feel so much different living here than somewhere else in so many ways. But yeah, I don't know, it's an interesting comparison video. I do like how he seemed like he wasn't taking digs at either side, but Europe is so diverse that we cannot speak of the European way of life as a whole, but of each individual by country, region, and sometimes by town or village. Culture not only means music, cinema, media, it often means for us Europeans general knowledge, history, geography, books, art, politics, social awareness of the world, and all those things. You as an American showing a map of Europe with countries like Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia is also a very subtle comedic touch. Yeah, it was a good video, to be fair. When he said Europeans feel like eating the fast food is almost morally wrong, I really felt it. Having lunch with other people or even by yourself has such a deep meaning for most of us, even if it's just for 20-30 minutes. I'm sure there are people in the US that if they're meeting their friends, they're gonna enjoy it. I mean, it's not like it's a complete difference. Like, humans are still the same species. You're not gonna just not enjoy your company of someone else. I do understand what he means, because I mean, but I'm sure whenever you eat, anyone who eats fast food after you eat it, you're gonna feel shit, or if you don't want to do it. Like, there was a good 2 years where I didn't order any fast food or anything, and yeah, I don't know, I just went through that phase. Now it's a bit different, and I do feel very bad after I eat it, or when I order it, I'm like, I don't want to do it, but that's just humans, man. It's not just, maybe it's a bit different, but I still think it's the same. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this reaction, and let me know your thoughts, of course. And if you want more video reactions to this channel, let me know. But yeah, until next time, like, subscribe. Peace.